So at this stage, what we had a direction setting meeting that first of all answered the why question using the WIFM, reduce, improve, maintain. We also had a direction setting meeting that explained what it was that we needed our team members to achieve using SMART. And now we've got a technique that will help us get the team together, to get involved, to increase levels of ownership, to have conversations about the plan in a way that reduces the planning traps. Now, I can understand at this stage, some of you might be thinking to yourself, that's all very well, Rod, but let me tell you about the cynical members of my team. Let me tell you about the team members who will put their hand up and say something like, that's all very well, Rod, but what happens if? But Rod, you and I have both been here long enough to know that we're not going to get the resources, we won't get the support, these sorts of questions. These are, of course, the what else, what if questions. And we asked you to list down 2 or 3 of these. What is it that your most cynical team members would say about this plan so far? We asked you to list those down before we worked out how to address these issues. So we asked you to complete another little task. Reproduce this without lifting your pen from the page. But we asked you to do this by yourself for 1 minute, focusing on your own page. And at the end of this 1 minute, because we were working as individuals, we ended up with a certain response. So when people ask to do this task by themselves, we get a variety of different responses. First of all, we get things like, can't be done, impossible. Well, there can't be too many ways. Or we get things like, oh, there's a trick to this and Rod knows the answer and we don't. Or we get things like, I don't want to be last, or I don't want to be the only person who can't do this. At the very best, we get someone who says, oh, I've seen this before and I know the answer. The interesting thing is that all of these responses lead to less than or equal to 1 way. And then what tends to happen is we stop. We don't think about the problem anymore. But what we identified is that what we need to do is sometimes we need to lead people beyond the initial response. We need to lead people to a new way of thinking. And so what we did is we did this, and I told you that there is over 30 ways of being able to deal with this particular issue. And because I said over 30 ways, we asked you to revisit the problem in groups, and within 10 minutes, together we came back and we indeed have over 30 ways. And what we identified here is that in order to get people beyond the less than or equal to 1 way problem, is that there is a number of things that we need to do. First of all, 2 heads are better than 1. We need to get people into a group. We need to get people out of their own way of thinking, and we need to get a variety of different perspectives approaching this problem. We also need to reset the standard. When I told you that there was over 30 ways, there was a response of, what, you're kidding? Unbelievable. And so that resetting the standard gave us the impetus that we needed to revisit the problem and to look at it in a different way. When we did it individually, our group may have come up with 3, 4, maybe 5 ways. If I had told you at that point that there was 7 ways of dealing with this problem, that would not have been sufficient for you to revisit the problem. Chances are most people would have said, oh, really? 7? Fantastic, Rod. What are the other 3? What are the other 2? Tell us. Let us get this over and done with, would have been the response. So we need to come up, when we reset the standard, we need to do it in a way that is significant enough to force people to revisit the problem. We also need to allocate time for people to look at these issues. You might remember we talked about how the corporate world tends to encourage movement and activity. It doesn't reward thinking. It doesn't reward sitting still and considering problems. So if we want people to be creative and innovative, what we've got to do is we need to allocate time. And also we noticed that what we did is we got you to toy with the context and toy with the content of the problem. So you might remember what we did is we said, if we take each individual word of the problem, reproduce this without lifting your pen from the page, and we toy with the content and the context, we can start to come up with dozens of ways. Reproduce this without lifting your pen from the page. And so when we addressed the same problem by applying those principles, getting together in groups, allocating some time, resetting the standard and toying with the content and the context, it became evident that there is in fact infinite ways of being able to reproduce this without lifting your pen from the page. And so together as a group we came up with far more than 30. And what we identified from this is that we sometimes as leaders need to apply the same key components, those same 4 things that we applied to this task, we need to apply to the perennial issues, the chestnuts that our team members are going to pull out of the drawer as a reason to not move, as a reason to not do what it is that we're asking them to do. The chestnuts like, but we don't have time. We won't get the resources. Head office will never approve it. Whatever it is that your team members are always saying as a reason to not move, what we can do is we can turn that into a statement like, reproduce this without lifting your pen from the page, and we can apply those principles. So we can't do it because we won't get the resources, the time or the approval, becomes a statement like, to find over 30 ways to be able to find the time, the resources and approval. And then if we allocate those 4 key principles, allocate the time, reset the standard, context and content, doing it again. Here we go, we're going to have to start again. What are the 4 key principles? Time, 2 heads are better than 1, reset the standard. Okay, so then if we can then allocate those 4 key principles to our perennial problem of allocating time, resetting the standard, getting together in groups and toying with the content and context, what happens is we may not come up with the answer, but what we identified is the more answers that we come up with, the less significant the problem starts to seem. The more answers we come up with, the more evident it becomes that really it's not that much of a problem. It's no longer an excuse to not move, to not do what it is that we're asking. That problem is indeed surmountable. And that's what we as leaders need to be able to do, lead people beyond problems.